Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar, where we get to sit down and talk with interesting professional guitar players and related music industry experts. If you love playing guitar, stick around. You're in the right place. Hey, this is Craig, and I just wanted to give you an update. Over the last 9 months, in large part because of your listener support, we've managed to build this show into one of the top guitar and human interest podcasts online. As a result, we now have openings for a select group of businesses to advertise on and sponsor this show. And I thought you, as a listener, would be in the best position to make recommendations to business owner friends of yours who might benefit from advertising here on the Everyone Loves Guitar show. So if you know a business owner who might profit from advertising on this show, have them connect with me by going to everyonelovesguitar.com/advertising. Again, that's everyonelovesguitar.com/advertising. I'd love to have a brief conversation with them to see how we might be able to help. Thanks for your help, and now let's get on with the show. Hey, everybody, this is Craig Garber from Everyone Loves Guitar. We got a super interesting guest today, very, great rock and roll artist. It's, I guess, as people refer to as Americana today, but I'm old, so I can just say it's rock and roll. We're here with SZLACHETKA. He's one of the top 10 new country artists you need to know per Rolling Stone. Again, I don't know that it's country, but he's a great player. Anyway, put it this way, I wouldn't call that country any more than I call the Eagles or Jackson Browne country music. To me, it's just California rock or laid back rock or just rock. Based in Nashville, SZLACHETKA grew up in New England, and he began his career as the frontman for the acclaimed roots rock band, the Northstar Session. He recorded 5 albums with them, and he appeared in the second season of NBC's Parenthood. After nearly a decade of touring with them, he left the band, struck out on his own, and he released his first solo album in 2014. His second solo album, called Heart of My Hometown, which is really great, came out just a few months ago. Like I said, it's super cool, great roots rock songs. And he's got a unique gift in that not only is he a great songwriter, but he's also actually a really good guitarist, and he's got a killer voice. A lot of passion in his singing. Throughout his travels, SZLACHETKA has shared the stage with the likes of Mike Campbell, Chris Isaak, Brandi Carlile, Brandi Clark, Huey Lewis and the News, John Waite, Tommy Emmanuel, Albert Lee, Chris Hillman, Cracker, Matthew Sweet, Jeanette Napolitano, which I have her record. I remember that. I haven't heard her name in a while. Hanson, Fishbone, The English Beat, and loads of other A-list acts. SZLACHETKA, thanks so much for coming on the show. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me, Craig.
So I have to ask this question. Why do you go by SZLACHETKA? Your first name is Matt. It's so simple.
Well, I figured I'd get rid of the hard part of the name. No, it's interesting because, my first solo record was just released under my full name, Matthew SZLACHETKA. And obviously when I left the Northstar Session, the whole stage name thing was obviously a talking point, and it was something I was really thinking about. But, I was still living in Los Angeles at the time, and some friends of mine who worked for a bunch of different labels, they were like, man, if there's any time to just have like a unique name, it's now. And I was like, all right. So I just kind of jumped into the fire, and so basically within the first 3 years of doing my solo career, which started in 2014, I was just going by the full name. And then when the second record came along, and and David Bianco was on board to produce it, some of these same people kind of came back like, well, man, there's some serious things on the table here. You might want to think about maybe, going with a 2-syllable stage name or something like that. And I was just like, yeah, I don't know. And for me, it was whatever I do, I feel like it always has to feel authentic. Otherwise I would feel like a fraud, and I guess especially within the rock and roll Americana world, that music is always prided for being just honest, and I think it would have been different if I hadn't already had 3 years under my belt of using my full name, but I was just like, all right, well, let me think about it. And I just, started thinking about some stage names that I didn't feel like I could pull it off. You know what I mean? And I'm not knocking stage names at all.
No, it wasn't you.
From a branding standpoint, it's necessary. But, another friend, this was right before I moved to Nashville, was like, dude, what if you just get rid of your first name and just beat people over the head with the last name SZLACHETKA? And I was like, I could do that, so it just makes it a talking point, and just just puts it right in your face, and Yeah.
Well, thanks for explaining that. And one thing you do that's really smart is if you go to SZLACHETKA's Facebook page, let me just spell his name. SZLACHETKA. So you're really smart because if you go to, I think it's your Facebook page or maybe your YouTube channel or both, you're really cool. You do this thing where you have in front of all the audiences, you make them say your name out loud. And I had a hard time, like, it's not because it's hard to pronounce, because the uniqueness of the spelling with the S and the Z is not common. So it throws it's like the words and the music don't match. It's an easy name to pronounce when it comes down to it.
Right.
But you make everybody do that. It's not make them, but it's like you make a fun thing out of it at the show. And I thought that was really smart. So go to SZLACHETKA's YouTube channel or Facebook page, and then you'll have no problem remembering his name after you watch this video.
Yeah, it's we have the 60-second teaser video and then the full 3-minute video as well.
Yeah.
But I tell you what, man, yes, it is a little bit of a challenge, but I think once it's just like beaten to people's heads, like they get it. And I guess the silver lining is I'm the only one with that name.
That's right. Well, apparently not. Somebody else has SZLACHETKA.com. I couldn't believe that.
Right? But, it was like last year when I did CMA Fest, every time I'd, check in to get a badge, like before I would play and stuff, everyone was like, man, I saw that name and I was wondering who that was and obviously how you pronounce it, but that's cool. And then same thing with like Americana Fest as well. When I did that last year, it definitely sticks out more than, your typical like Ray Brown or, something. So
well, cool. I'm all for it if you think it's authentic. So let's talk to SZLACHETKA. Solo album, Northstar Session. You were with them a decade, man. What prompted you to leave? That's a pretty bold move. I give you credit.
Sure. I think, I don't know, not to sound cliche, but, I think, bands have a shelf life, and I think
everything does. Yes, man.
I think at some point, it's just, it was kind of starting to get a little stagnant. I think, people in the band, were starting to get, other interests. And I know for me, I was just doing like a ton of writing on my own and with other writers because, that's one thing I do. I write for and with a lot of other artists. I just was writing material that I just felt way more strong about. And then it might not have necessarily worked with that band. And to be honest, I just wasn't happy. For me, it was a point where, it just kind of felt like I was, punching a time clock every time with that. And I just was like, man, I didn't get into music to not be happy and be really inspired of what I'm doing. So I just, 2013 was like the last year we toured, but I started recording my first solo record then and, released it in 2014.
It's interesting. All musicians, or almost all musicians, are very in tune with whether they're happy doing what they're doing. And when they're not, they are pretty quick, or they take action on it reasonably quickly. And I think that's a very healthy thing, actually,
Totally. I think, I don't know. You can always make money, right? I was like, if I was just in it for a monetary purpose, like I'd obviously be doing a different job. But, for me, it's the creative process. It's, enjoying every aspect of it because, don't get me wrong. There's moments where it's a complete grind.
Absolutely.
And it's like, if it's a grind and I'm not enjoying the music still, like something's wrong.
Yeah.
So it was just one of those strong gut feelings where it was tough because, loyalty is a big thing for me and, time spent with people is important. And especially when you put so much time with people and like they put hard work into, there definitely was a guilt factor in there, but I just had to, kind of, I guess, be selfish and kind of take care of me for a minute and just be like, look,
no. Those two people mistake that, I think, being selfish and taking care of yourself. They're really two kind of mutually exclusive things. I think so. Taking care of yourself is taking care of yourself. Being selfish is taking care of yourself at other people's expense.
Right.
And I don't think that's probably not what you did. You just didn't feel healthy anymore doing that.
Yeah. I just, it was one of those just, it was a major crossroads moment, and it was definitely a big opening of a new chapter.
Good, man. Well, good for you. And your albums, I haven't heard the first one, but this record's great. So whatever you're doing is working. What was making and you know what, you said something that was interesting. I thought of, I felt guilty, and that's, I'm 54 and I can't tell you how many people around me are like divorcing and getting divorced. And I know most of them and I'm divorced. This is my second marriage. I was fortunate because I didn't really linger around a long time because I wasn't happy, but I see so many of these people that are our age that are like, they're in that relationship way too long. And it's like, so they got some people years and years, 10, 20 years that they have felt this way, and so I think that's the common thing in any relationship situation is hanging around.
Sure.
Hey, was making a solo record different from when you were part of a group? And if so, what was different about it?
Well, in a group, there's definitely a lot more politics. I learned a lot from being in a band for so long, but for me, making a solo record is way easier just because obviously it's your vision and
I want to do this and it gets done. Yeah,
exactly. And for me, I remember cutting the first record and it was at a time where I just wasn't being satisfied at all, in the band and touring. And I was just strictly doing it just to pay the bills and save money. And everything I was making was getting put into the record and, whatever else I could save. But I hired my friends for the record. And so when we did all the basic tracking live, that week we cut it, it was like a clubhouse. And it was I remember everybody feeling, sad at the end of the week when it was, obviously we did all the vocals and overdubs at one of the producers' houses but after that first week of just the basic tracking, it was definitely a major release for me, and I think that's really the major asset of doing a solo career. I think, you can always kind of have a rotating cast of players, you know what I mean? And so even now, I've got my kind of main group of guys that are playing with me in Nashville, but each position I've got at least a few people on reserve in case, the main guys can't do it,
that's
for
great.
Subs,
Yeah, that's
and,
great.
But at the same time, one of the biggest things I've learned is just surround yourself with people that you want to be around, even if they're not the best player, if you enjoy being around them and enjoy going on the road with them and enjoy making music with them, you're going to play that much better and it's going to come off sounding that much better when you're performing live,
Yeah, for sure, man. So that's interesting what you said. There's not as much politics. Yeah. Because you're the guy, which must be really refreshing.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, I don't know. I have, everybody has their opinions, but I have a pretty clear vision of who I am as an artist now and what my sound is and stuff. And I just don't think that it needs to be compromised with, someone else because I want my part to be a little bit louder or this or that, Yeah.
So. Which is things you have to do when you're in a relationship. You got to give and take, even,
totally.
A musical relationship. It's not a bad thing. It's just, you have to do it, It can't be all
Absolutely.
about you. So let's talk about the new record, Heart of My Hometown. It's called. I thought it was really refreshing. And the first time I listened to it, it kind of reminded me, it really reminded me very much of how I felt when I first listened to those early Eagles and Jackson Browne records. And I thought your voice, this is maybe a weird comment, your voice suits the music really well. You should be singing that music. You shouldn't be singing metal or blues or anything like that. It was wow, that really fits what he's doing,
I think if I tried to sing metal, my head would explode and my voice would just. I hats off to anybody who can sing that stuff because my voice wouldn't be able to take that. I can sing for hours and sing pretty loud over band and stuff, but just that type of screaming and stuff, I can't do that at all. But someone like Steven Tyler, man, I've always been in awe of that guy's voice because it's just. Especially for the maintenance of it as well, which is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
But no, thank you so much. I'll take, I'll take that compliment any day. But yeah, it's just, obviously everybody goes through phases, but when I really started honing in and developing my sound and getting my my songwriting down and everything, and refining my voice. That's really just what came out. And it's probably just obviously a result of, just growing up on all that stuff between, Jackson Browne, the Eagles, Tom Petty was obviously a huge influence. Dylan, Little Feat, because I've always been a huge fan of Lil George, and like between his vocals and then his slide playing, stuff like that,
It's funny you mentioned Dylan. I saw the Wallflowers are down here recently, and it was really funny because Jacob Dylan, from the Wallflowers, sounded at times just like his dad. It was really, really funny. And it's different when you're hearing someone on the record, I think, and live, because, he was talking and stuff, and it was really funny listening to him, and it was not a lot of people there because unfortunately it was terrible rain. And, it's just funny to hear it. And I was with my wife.
Well, it's in the blood, man.
Yeah, it was just really funny. And anyway, so I wanted to talk about a couple of songs on the record, but
sure.
Did you do anything different in the making of this record versus your first one? Because now you have you're more experience under your belt.
I did. I tried to do as much of a different approach as I can, just because it mainly spawned off of, I got to work with a Grammy-winning producer named David Bianco on this record, who he engineered, mixed, and obviously produced the record. But he won a Grammy for engineering the Tom Petty Wildflowers album, which,
right.
For me, like that's one of the albums that like I could go to the grave with, his discography it's stupid. It like doesn't end. Between records that he's produced, engineered, or mixed. He's done a bunch of records by Springsteen, Dylan, Lucinda Williams. He engineered the Bruce Springsteen live from 75 to 85 box set. So,
wow.
That was an album that was always on when I was growing up. He's done so many of my Desert Island favorite records, and just being able to get associated with him in his wheelhouse and to be, I guess, indirectly related to, that lineage of like Tom Petty and those people was a huge honor for me. And it was a major thing. And so
how did you get hooked up with him? Sorry, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Kind of through Lucinda Williams, I guess. I got a really, really good friend of mine who I've known for a long time. He's like huge supporter. He's kind of like really in the, my buddy Tony, he's totally in that Lucinda Williams camp, and like he helps out with stuff on their website, and he also helps out Doug Pettibone a lot, who Doug played on the record. He played pedal steel, and he played like the rhythm guitar parts on Heart of My Hometown, and then he played all the mandolin stuff as well.
Okay.
But he played with Lucinda for a long time. Doug played with John Mayer for like 3 to 4 years, like on the when John first came back, like from his throat issue, like the Born and Raised tour or whatever. So that was Doug doing like, he was playing like everything.
Okay.
But so basically through being friends with Tony and then ultimately becoming friends with Doug, there was a period in like California, like when Lucinda's album, Down Where the Spirit Meets the Bone came out. That was like, she released 2 double records, and that was the first of the 2. And right around that time, she was doing this like smaller theater California residency where she was just going up and down the coast. And so I met David at one of those shows, and it was interesting because, Lucinda's band, like her rhythm section, David Sutton and Butch Norton, David was producing a few songs for a buddy of mine named Craig Ferguson. And, I had sung a bunch of harmonies on those recordings. And then so David was mixing those tracks. And so between that and then my other buddy, Austin Hanks, who I was telling you about earlier, who's a writing partner of mine, he's like Billy Gibbons' main writing partner. David was producing his record too. So I met David at, one of Lucinda's shows, and then we kind of just started a correspondence then. And I remember I was in the studio cutting some acoustic guitars on Austin's record, and that's like when I met him again. And then one of the guitar players that played with Austin was like, "Man, you should hit up Dave, man." Like, and I was like, I don't think he'd have time, or like I didn't think that he'd be able to work within my budget.
Yeah, of course.
And
that's,
I was talking to like a bunch of other producers, and I was like, screw it, I'll call Dave. And he called me like right back, and we had a great chat. And then I sent him like 35 songs, and within a day or two, he got back and was like, man, like the fact that you already sort of have like a track listing from this is amazing. He was like, I could cut every one of these with you. He's like, I'm in if you still are interested in working with me. And I was just like,
wow, that's so cool.
Yeah. And so, working with him, Brian Lucy mastered the record, and, his mastering company is called Magic Garden Mastering. And he's done all like the Black Keys and Dan Auerbach stuff I think the first Black Keys record he started with was their brother's record. And then, so all that stuff, he did like the latest Doyle Bramhall record, and
I love that guy.
Stuff. So yeah, he's been one of my all time favorites. But he was involved along with some of the people I wrote a bunch of the songs with, and then just the players as well. So already going into it, from what I was spending on the record, and then all the names attached, I knew that I needed to approach it differently. I didn't want to just release the record. So it definitely was an exercise in patience. The recording, mixing, and mastering process was like a month. It was like super easy. And then I basically sat on the record for pretty much 2 years, just because I wanted to get the right team around it to, have a proper release. And,
wow, that's, that must have been like, wow. How did you do that?
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure it out.
Holy shit.
It was to say it was a staggered release is an understatement. So, I didn't want to release it without having proper management. And, I definitely wanted to, have like a radio campaign and then a PR campaign with it, just from everything that we were just talking about. And if I hadn't waited, I wouldn't have had my manager who I have right now, which is, she's been just crushing it for me. And then, like the stuff with Rolling Stone wouldn't have happened leading into the album release, along with a bunch of other press that was kind of coming out. And then, so what I did is kind of just did like the slow burn, like released Heart of My Hometown as a single first, and then released the video for it, and then released Wildflowers on the Highway as a single, and then the video for that. And then in between that, like there was other press coming out. So that way, this past February 16th, when it finally was officially released, we had a bunch of other kind of, irons in the fire.
Are you disciplined in general like that? Because that's really because it's like having a baby, man. You're like, I'm due. Like, no. I want to keep it in there another 9 months. That's a lot of, it's tough.
I try to be as disciplined as I can. I'm a big proponent of like routine, especially because there's so much uncertainty in the music business, and so if I can, create like a routine that just keeps me like on a cycle, and just, it's almost like a mantra.
Like what? Like give me an example.
So like usually every day I wake up, I don't know, anywhere from like 6:30 to 7:30, I'll go running, and then I come back and exercise, coffee, and then I try to bang out like all of my, admin or like booking emails and stuff like that in the morning. And then, so that way it opens up the afternoon for co-writes or practicing, just so you have that, regiment, or, if I have time, like to read and stuff like that. But I just, for me, if I don't have, some sort of normalcy like that, like I would probably just go insane,
No, you make it sounds like you make a normalcy, it doesn't just happen,
Right.
It doesn't just, ask all the people who like don't know, who have no organization. It doesn't happen. Good for you, man. I give you credit. That's a lot of discipline to hold that back for 2 years till you had all the things working, and it's worked. So.
Yeah. So right now it's like, I'm really hoping that by the end of this year, we'll at least, be in talks with whoever's going to produce the next one, and really hoping to have a lot of pre-production kind of under my belt, because it's interesting. I was saying I came into this album with 35 songs, and shit.
Well, I was going to ask you, how many of those are now? Why do you have to have anything done? Don't you have? How many tracks are on here? 11.
11, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
So you got 24 songs in theory.
Right. But that's like what I came to the table for that record with. And then so since then, I probably have like 100 songs, going into this. So it's just going to be really tricky, I think, finding the right collection, just kind of have that cohesive story that goes with the album,
Well, cool, man. Those are all good problems to have.
Right.
Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, let's talk about some of the tracks on the album. I like Heart of My Hometown. That's the title track. It was really great groove. It was like very optimistic, very upbeat, and you actually take a really great guitar solo in there. I was curious what the backstory of that song was and what made you select that as the title of the album as well.
Good question. So I wrote that with Jamie Kent, who he's like, one of my main writing partners. We actually both grew up in Western Massachusetts, and he was definitely one of the main people pushing to get me to move to Nashville, because he moved to Nashville about like 3 or 4 years ago. And, we grew up kind of like in like the Springfield, Northampton area. He kind of grew up more in Northampton, and I was there all the time for school and just had a lot of friends up there.
But you didn't know each other as a kid, or you did?
No, it's funny. We actually met each other we had the same guitar teacher. And he's a little bit younger than me, but the guy that I took lessons with, his son, who lives in Nashville now, he's a beast of a player. This guy, Jules Belmont, but he used to play with Jamie, like when Jamie was first starting out.
Okay.
And this is back when I was, still on the Northstar Session. And, they're like, well, you guys should meet, because, you guys should definitely trade gig information and like, just talk shop. Cause he actually, he went to Babson for, entrepreneurship.
Babson College. Yeah. Why do I know that?
Yeah. So he's really, really good.
Is that like a big liberal arts school maybe? Or
it's a business school.
Okay.
It's like right outside Boston.
Okay.
Yeah. So, we just initially first met, obviously talk shop and swapped gig info and stuff, but then we just became like really good friends. And then we started writing together, and we just realized that we had a really good penchant for writing good songs. And, we had a really good just vibe and flow when we write. But, that song came about, I think, because first of all, no matter where you go, I think there's always a part of where you're from that's going to be in you, whether you like it or not. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and
whether you like it or not. Ain't that the truth?
And I feel like, people either stay where they're from or they move. And if they move somewhere, they try to find someplace different, but that has some semblance of, where they're from. But regardless, there's something that you can never get rid of in your, DNA from wherever you're from.
Sure.
And the thing I started noticing all the time is just from all my touring across the country, north, south, east, west, red state, blue state, I'd keep coming into these towns, and they just would always remind me of where I'm from. And the people like I would meet on the road, every time I'd come back, felt more like family to me. And just, it can be a lonely place. Especially like when I do a lot of solo acoustic tours,
Yeah.
And it just was like a really comforting feeling, and that's kind of where we got that sentiment from. And I think, especially right now, I think this is the only, I guess, realm into politics I'll get into. But I think right now,
you said red state, blue state. I was thinking, okay, that's the political commentary for this interview.
Right? Yeah, it's like here's my opinionated thing. No, I'm just kidding. But
no, it's all good, man.
I think. Every time you turn the news on these days, it's just worse and worse and worse. But I think there's a lot more similarities between everybody in this country right now than we're being made out to.
Of course there
be
is.
Right now. And I just think the biggest thing is if, obviously not everybody has the luxury of traveling all the time, but it's more just keeping an open mind and heart and listening to people versus just trying to, cram your ideals down somebody's throat, and that's one of the big takeaways for me with that song, so.
I agree with what you just said, man. I think people are a lot more similar than, there's only like maybe 8 flavors of people really, or something like that. It's not, I mean, not to put people in categories, but there's only, people have core things that drive them, and there's not 1,000 of them. There's like a small handful pretty much. What guitar are you playing in that solo? It sounded really good. Was that your Strat?
That actually is my Tele right now. Let me see if I can actually flip this.
SZLACHETKA's walked about 5 miles so far. We're only on question 3.
There we go. I know. I'm trying to. Oops. Hold on a minute.
This is the guitar part of the show.
There we go.
Look at the guitars. There you go.
Can you see that?
Yeah. Oh, nice looking telly. It's like a sunburst.
Yeah.
Is that an ebony neck?
So this is,
oh, no, it's rosewood.
This is probably like, I am biased, but this guitar is like, I think it's probably one of the best sounding tellies I've ever played. I think I paid like $300 for it. Originally, it was one of those.
It's like a Mexican telly or something?
It was a Japanese. Technically, it's called the Nashville telly. So if you can see here, it's kind of contoured like a strap on the back.
Sure.
And so originally, it had 3 single coils. And this is still the original bridge pickup. I believe it's oh man, it's a Tex-Mex pickup, I think. And it's got so much
Texas special,
grit
I think they call them, right?
Not that. There was like for this line, and there was like a small period of like, this was like from like the late 90s, I think.
Okay.
And around that time they had the Texas specials, but they also had these Tex-Mex pickups too. Like the Jimmy Vaughn Strat, when it first came out, had those same types of pickups.
The Tex-Mex pickups? That was before the wall.
Yep. And so, and so I basically, I really like the vibe of the old Tele Customs, which, like the old Keith Richards guitar.
Sure.
And so I took out the 2 single coils and I put a Gibson 57 humbucker in the neck.
I love
and then I put big
pickup.
frets on it.
Yeah.
And so, I had it in middle position. And so that's the guitar I used for that solo. And it's actually the same guitar I used for the solo on Ready to Run Again as well.
Really cool looking guitar, man. Really nice.
But it's just, it's one of those things, man, where I've played amazing guitars that are super expensive, and I've played amazing guitars that are like $200 or $300. And, I'm at a point where I'm just like, if it works and it sounds great,
that's all
I'll totally use it.
Did you have that work done in Nashville?
No, this was actually when I was still living in Massachusetts, like right after I graduated college is when I bought this. I actually, the guy that used to work on my guitars back then, he unfortunately passed away, but
sorry about
it was this guy named Frank Lucchese who he was unbelievable, man. I mean, he could take like a guitar in pieces to him and he would just make it look like nothing happened to it. He was a really, really special guy and a really, really talented luthier. But yeah, he did the work on this guitar for me.
Yeah, because you need someone pretty competent to replace 2 single coils and put in a humbucker. I love that 57. I have those pickups on my SG. They are amazing. I absolutely love them. The classic 57s.
It's a super versatile guitar too,
Until that echo, it doesn't sound anything like it, but that song really reminded me of Witchy Woman by the Eagles for some reason.
Sure.
Has anybody else said that? I mean, it sounds nothing at all like it, but it was very...
That's a good reference for sure. I mean, especially with like, they've got those kind of like ominous background vocals going on.
Right. That was it.
That song for me, I mean, in the same vein, that song for me, it's one of my favorites from the record, but it kind of, for me, has that like early Heartbreakers or like old Bad Company kind of vibe,
Yeah, it was like a heavy song, You had the B3 in there, which sounded great. You had like these really subtle small fills that really, took it to that next level.
Totally.
The chorus was great. You had vocal overdubs in there. You had a lead guitar solo in the background, and you had a great climax as you close out the song. And I was curious, is this a love song or is it about a breakup?
It's kind of about that. It's kind of like about that White Buffalo kind of, vibe of like, that, you could obviously,
first time you hesitated the whole call here at SZLACHETKA.
If it's from a female perspective or a male perspective, but it's basically about that, like, that woman that you can't have type thing. You know what I mean? So it's that, I guess, that forbidden fruit kind of vibe,
Gotcha.
But yeah, this is the guitar. Can you see this right now?
Yeah, that's a nice looking strap. That's an ebony neck, isn't it? Or is that?
Rosewood.
It's rosewood.
This guitar this is probably like my number one. This is it's a early to mid 90s American 62 reissue Strat that it's just naturally starting to relic right now, which is great. And
looks beautiful.
I got this still when I was in college, and I had it refretted. I think they're I think they're like 6100s on there. But the pickups I have in this are Van Zant blues pickups. So they're like a little bit hotter than just a traditional single coil.
Sure.
And so that's what I used on the rhythm for that song and the solo.
You play that a lot because I see that in videos a lot.
Yeah, it's just probably the guitar I'm most comfortable on. Between that or my Telly, I think.
Ladder to the Stars.
So that was a song. Actually, getting back to the previous one, that's a song I wrote with Scott Underwood, who is the drummer in the band Train.
Okay, cool.
And I've written quite a bit of tunes with him, and that's just, like I said, that's one of my favorites on the record. But Ladder to the Stars was written with Jamie Kent again, and then we also wrote that with Jeff Silbar. Jeff is another one of my main writing partners. He actually was at my house yesterday, but he wrote "Wind Beneath My Wings."
It's so cool. I don't know if this is like this everywhere, but in Nashville, it is so cool because people are so supportive of like doing what you're doing. Like, oh, I co-wrote this with Jamie Kent. I wrote this with Jeff Silbar also. It's such a nice, it's one of the many things I've really appreciated about everybody in Nashville.
Right.
It's just such an incredibly supportive place where you don't have anybody, other places, maybe somebody wouldn't even happen to mention that.
Sure.
And then there's nothing wrong with it, but that's what I'm saying. There is nothing wrong with it. So it's just like really cool to hear. And I like your parquet wood floors, by the way.
Oh yeah. These are the hardwoods, baby. Yeah. It took me 3 days to clean these things when I first moved into this house.
Man,
so
been there, done that. I feel you on that one, man.
But that one, for me, that song was actually one of the first songs I wrote with Jeff. We wrote that at his place in Studio City, and it's a perfect example. I think one of my probably biggest influences was like Mississippi John Hurt, and just from like that traditional folk blues fingerstyle thing, and one thing that I've always loved about that style is they always implement the vocal melody with whatever, they're doing with the finger picking,
Sure.
And so it's like you have melodies built into, the inner chord and then the lower bass line that's going on with that. So that was, something that I came up with when we were just at his house. 'Cause Jeff has, he probably has like one of the best personal gear collections I've ever seen in my life. Like
Wow.
someone who's not like Eric Clapton or something like that,
That's pretty impressive.
So we showed up at his house, and I think he had just gotten back from a Nashville trip, and he had like this awesome old Gretsch tube amp, and I think he bought like a matching set of like, an old Gretsch hollow body and like a little tube amp. He's like, "Hey man, try that out." And that was something that immediately came out, and we started writing it. So
what, couple of questions. Is the Ladder to the Stars, is that like a metaphor for something?
That one for us, we were, it's kind of like that song that's about that like kind of loss of innocence when you have like teenage years and stuff where
coming of age.
We literally had like no idea what we were going to write about. And I started kind of playing that guitar fingerstyle melody thing. And we were just like, man, this kind of reminds us of like, that age of wonder where you're just like, all you want to do is get out of the house, find yourself, find your own identity. And, then we just started like thinking of imagery, like, where is this going to take place? Like, is this going to take place like in the Midwest or Texas? And like, what are certain, I guess landmarks of those parts of the country were like water towers, and just like, it's kind of like that sense of freedom where like you get up there and you find yourself, you can kind of let go and just forget about, I guess, your troubles or what else,
The whole album was like that, though. It was really a positive, optimistic, major key album as opposed to, minor stuff. Is when you were playing guitar, it sounded like there was some effect on there.
So that was cut with, hold on, let me see if I can, here we go. Oops. Nope. I'm trying to flip this camera around here. so I can show you.
Just turn the camera around. Don't even worry about it.
Yeah. Can you see that?
Yeah, I see his 335.
Yeah, it's my 335. So that was cut with that. And then I used 4 amps on the record. And we always ran 2 amps going at once, and we just paired, like the best 2 pairs for whether it was a rhythm or like a solo. But the 1 amp that was on everything was my 62 Princeton.
Oh, wow.
Which is, it's a, brown face. It's right here, but
nice.
So that was
wow. What a
what
a beautiful amp, man.
Yeah.
That's in really good condition. That's older than I am. Not by much.
Yeah.
But
it's a Craigslist find when I was still in LA, and I got it for just a steal. And, so I think what you're probably hearing though too is, and I can't remember, I either paired that with, I've got an early 70s Princeton reverb. So it was either that, or I think maybe the 2 other amps I used aside from my 2 Princetons, I used like a late 40s Gibson Tweed.
Oh, wow.
And then I borrowed those 2 amps from my amp guy in LA, and he also made this amazing, hand-wired recreation of a 57 Deluxe.
Where'd you get a late 40s Gibson? That's a pretty, was it like a 30 watt?
No, it was, man, that thing was probably like 15 watts max. My buddy Jack Jennings, who would do all my amp work in LA, he let me borrow those 2 amps.
Wow.
And aside from, his amps that he builds or tweaks, or, he's got a nice vintage collection too. So
what's that right in front of me there?
So this is my early 70s Princeton reverb.
That's a great amp.
Jack's done some work on. Like, he put a bigger transformer. It's like a 20 watt deluxe reverb transformer in there, and then he also put another 10-inch speaker in there that has a bigger magnet. It's one of those Ragin' Cajun eminence speakers.
Is that politically correct to have a speaker named that nowadays?
I don't know, man. Right?
Because people in Louisiana are going to be very offended.
Right. But I think the effect you're probably hearing is that one thing I always do is I always keep the tremolo on.
Yeah,
but I keep
subtle.
it at like a slight out of phase thing. So I basically have the intensity and the speed at like 9 o'clock.
Okay.
So that way it just has that like slight little out of phase thing. So
I love tremolo. I have a tremolo built into my amp. I absolutely love it. I think it's such a fantastic, gives you really a lot of depth. I really enjoy that as an effect.
Totally.
Man, your work ethic is, I think you told me when we first spoke, you do like 200 road gigs a year.
Yeah, it usually works out to around that.
Wow. That's tremendous work ethic. What do you, like, so last week, I think you called me or we were talking, you were texting, you're like, oh, I'm on my way to Iowa or something like that now. What do you, how do you keep motivated to do that? Because I know, motivation ebbs and flows. And when you're doing what you're doing, it's high. When you're, filling up with gas for the second time between point A and point B, not so high.
Right. I don't know. I think it's, I really can't imagine doing anything else. I mean, I moved to Nashville, a little over a year ago, and there are a lot of reasons, but one, I don't want to keep like a 12-month tour schedule up. I want to basically try to whittle it down to like 4 to 6 months. So that way I have, more control over when, where, and how I tour. And still, I still balance out my touring between, taking my backing band and then doing solo acoustic tours. And it's all just, if guarantees aren't exactly where they need to be, like I'll go out solo acoustic. If they're where they need to be, I'll take my band, and I've been playing with a 5-piece, which has been great. But
drums,
it's just, so it's another guitar, bass, drums, and keys. Okay. And then, the second guitar player, bass player, and keyboard player sing too. So it's like, it's
a full band.
A really thick sound. It's great. Yeah.
I just give you a lot of credit for that, because I'm assuming based upon what the album's doing and the receptiveness and where things are going, that it's all working. Whatever plan you're going, you're comfortable. I mean, you're probably never comfortable with the results. if you're like any kind of type A at all, but you're seeing positive, the momentum, the plane is moving down the runway.
Absolutely. And it's, when I really started, tapping into the Midwest and like parts of the South, this is like after I, was coming to Nashville a lot for like writing sessions and other session work and stuff and meetings. I just noticed like a really positive reaction from, like Midwest audiences and like Texas and stuff. And I don't know, it's kind of different on the West Coast, especially for like my kind of music. I feel like it's I guess resonates better, with like the Midwest and the South and like the Northeast and stuff. And, from a location standpoint, Nashville is so much more efficient where it's located, because like you can drive anywhere from like 3 to 8 hours around Nashville, and you've hit so many other markets versus California where, you drive 8 hours and sometimes you haven't even made it out of LA. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yes, I do.
And it's just a more, because touring, it's incredibly tiring and it's incredibly rewarding at the same time. But I feel like there's way more bang for your buck, being located here, and you get definitely much more positive results from your time spent on the road here. And I think audiences here are just, I don't know what it is. They're just more perceptive, or I've really been able to feel like I've been building something more since I've started, playing this part of the country, and ever since I moved here, It's
interesting that California, they're not as receptive to the vibe, because to me, like I said, and I hate to compare music, but like I got the same feeling when I listened to the Eagles for the first time in the 70s, when I listened to Jackson Brown,
right.
And both of those guys, the Eagles as a band and Jackson Brown originated out of California.
Right.
So it's weird that, anyway, but, well, I'm glad that it's working, because I know you're working hard, man, and you have you're supporting some great music, a great album and some great music. So you said you're from Western Mass. What was growing up there like? What was your childhood like?
It was great, man. It's funny, because I moved to California like right after college, and I had like the West Coast California bug early on, and before I moved, I was like, man, this place sucks. I just got to get out of here, and I think like a lot of people feel like wherever they grow up. And I remember moving to California like 3,000 miles away, and after I was there for a while, I was like, man, Western Mass doesn't suck. It's a great place to grow up, I have just really fond memories of growing up there, and Western Mass is, it's about like an hour and a half max west of Boston. Mm-hmm. So, it's like right on 91. It's, grew up like 20 minutes north of Hartford, and right on the Connecticut River, and it's beautiful. It's more spread out. There are some great cities there, but there's a lot of diversity there, which is really cool. And it was just a really like fertile area to grow up, and there were always, like, particularly like in Northampton, there were always like a great circuit of music acts going through there. And I took guitar lessons up there and stuff, and so it was just, I was getting introduced to like a lot of different genres of music and types of people, ever since I was a little kid. So
cool. Do you have any siblings?
I do have a younger brother.
Is he into music?
He's a huge music fan. Doesn't play music, but him and I talk about music all the time. But he lives with his family in Fort Collins, Colorado. But they're actually moving back to southern Maine in the middle of the summer.
So, oh wow, Colorado's beautiful. Maine is beautiful too, though, man.
Yeah, it is. It's one of my favorite places in the world.
I love actually like upstate New York, but it's just too damn cold, man. I couldn't deal with that.
It definitely gets cold.
I'm into the sun, and once you've been down in Florida a little while, you get used to that sunshine.
Sure.
Were any of your parents musical?
They had like a really strong appreciation for music. They learned, a bunch of folk songs when they were, in their late teens, early 20s, learned a bunch of Bob Dylan, Pete Seeger tunes and Joan Baez. So, like, you know, they'd be strumming the guitar around, nothing crazy, but, you know, I can't really remember a day where music wasn't played in the house. Like, my dad had a great record collection, and between that and then, you know, the radio, between, you know, like NPR or, I mean, classical, jazz, blues, country, folk, you know, rock and roll, you know, it was always on. And sure. I just remember, you know, resonating with it really early on.
What kind of work did your folks do?
So my dad was an accountant by trade, and then, you know, he ended his career with a company called Mass Mutual.
Oh yeah, insurance company, Health and Life.
Yeah, and then my mother was a nurse practitioner, so she worked in like neonatal NICU units.
Yeah,
so, you know, blue collar family, like, worked their ass off, and definitely instilled that in their two boys.
You know what? Not many people know this. I was an accountant out of school.
Really?
I was a CPA. Yeah, that was my. Yeah, it's hard to imagine me doing that, but so, like, when did you decide that, okay, this is what I want to do? I'm going to play guitar, and, like, how did that whole thing come about?
I played cello early on when I was like 9 or 10 for a couple years.
Dude, that would have been like SZLACHETKA, the world, you know, cellist. I'm telling you, man, your name would have been perfect there.
Yeah, man. So I remember distinctively, like, the day that, you know, a different music teacher came in and she played cello, and I was like, wow, this is an amazing instrument. So I played that for a couple of years and then put it down. And then I started playing guitar when I was in 7th grade, and always just loved everything classic rock, blues, you know, folk. And that was like what my real early influences were. But I think somewhere in high school, I just kind of really felt deep down that I wanted to make a go of music. And, you know, being in the Northeast, you know, the college thing is like, it's like a pretty big deal up there. Like, you know, it's kind of beat down everybody's, or cram down people's throats to go to college. So I went to college and ended up majoring in music, but I just figured at the time going into it, you know, I'd have to do the corporate thing and get a job with benefits and stuff, and then try to
a job with benefits,
you know, figure out the music thing. And right by the time I ended college, I just kind of was like, screw it. I just have to do this, you know, just dive in head first. And I just moved to San Diego first and kind of cut my teeth there, getting more experience under my belt that I needed. And then, you know, I moved up to LA in like between 2005 and 2006, when I was kind of going up there regularly for like session work and writing sessions and gigs. And, you know, kind of each move or each different thing was a different stepping stone. And, you know, it's got me where I'm at now.
And you did all this yourself? Like, you had nobody like advising you, or?
That's the thing. Yeah. I mean, I wish I did. But yeah, it was all just kind of me.
That's great, man. I give you a lot of credit for doing that. It's not easy.
Thank you.
Along those lines, what mistakes, you know, did you make along the way, and what did you learn from those mistakes?
Sure. Well, I think there's definitely been a few. I think one of the main ones is, and I don't know, man. I'm always a strong believer of, like, I don't know. I think things happen for a reason sometimes, but they happen at right moments, like when you put yourself in that position or work really hard to get there. You know, so I mean, something that always crosses my mind is like, man, what would have happened if I went solo earlier, or just like started out solo? You know what I mean? Versus doing the band thing. And I don't have any regrets, but, you know, would I be farther along from like a branding standpoint or just like the name recognition standpoint? You know, but at the same time, like, if I had done that earlier, like, I might not have had the certain connections I had by the time that I went solo, and it might not have been as smooth of a transition. But I think one of the biggest things from, you know, being in a band, and even now, I think who you surround yourself with is incredibly important.
Yeah.
Because particularly, like, if you're in a band or, you know, any other business or whatever, they are a reflection of you. And whether, you know, if you're cool with a bunch of people, but somebody else in your camp, you know, is not, or, you know, isn't as courteous or, tactful around people, that ultimately comes off representing you.
Sure.
And I think, even from hiring people that play with me, I mean, like, I don't hire people that I don't like being around. You know what I mean? It's like, if you can't be around somebody, even if they're like a monster player, like that's just not a good representation of who you are. And I think that's a really, really strong thing to keep in mind, because for a long time, I'd be in situations where I'm like, well, I'm cool with somebody, or like, I'm cool with this or that. Like, I'm sure that people are totally fine with the whole scenario. And then like a year down the line or a couple of years down the line, you hear from those people like, well, yeah, we didn't necessarily like you guys because of certain members or whatever,
Yeah. Interesting.
It's a really interesting, I think it's a really interesting and key component to keep in, your wheelhouse.
So you vet people out pretty carefully before you bring them on board?
Totally. I feel really fortunate with who I have in my circle and who's like around me. Because I in return, like I'm an incredibly loyal person, and I value relationships, immensely, and
Sure.
I've worked really hard to keep good people in my life, not just from I'm not talking about like, I only keep people who can advance my career. I think that's bullshit. I mean,
no, it doesn't sound like you're saying that. No, you keep people that support your mission, man.
Totally.
That doesn't sound like you're saying that at all. Don't
Yeah. It's funny. I was talking to a good friend of mine about this yesterday, but just having like a really healthy circle of people around you is so important,
Yeah. Very important. No, and especially, you could look at it the other way. You could say, I just want to make sure I have someone around me that's not destroying my career, is really the big concern, because you're busting your ass out there, and you don't want to.
Totally.
You need to have someone that's supporting that, not destroying that. You're building a business and you want to get momentum to get that airplane off the ground, and you got to have someone that can help you do that.
Absolutely.
It's totally cool. So if you were to advise your younger self of something to go back, what would you have advise yourself? And that question that that you just said, that I wonder what would have happened if I gone, a lot of people have that same that's a big question mark. I mean, not that people are not, and I'm sure you're not like laying in bed at night thinking this, you answered a question I asked, but a lot of people have that same, I wish I would have done this earlier, or if I wonder what would have happened if.
Right.
So it's pretty common.
I mean, you asked the same question, like, I'm like, man, should I have moved to Nashville earlier? And it's like, I could have, obviously, but, one of the other really important things for me of moving to Nashville was the ability to buy a house, because, I couldn't afford a mailbox in LA. And,
sure.
With everything that's been going on in Nashville, like, I knew I didn't want to miss that boat.
Yeah.
And so that's why I really felt the urgency I did to move here. But, if I had moved to Nashville earlier, kind of the same way of, when I decided to go solo, it might not have been as seamless of a process moving here if I had moved earlier. I mean, like I met my manager when I was still living in LA, but I was out here, and it was a really kind of serendipitous moment of me meeting her. But, like stuff like that, like moving here with having management like that, who's someone who's like an incredibly established force in the music business, was huge for me, So yeah, I think, if I could give advice to my younger self, I think I would go back to even like in high school, because, and I'm so glad I realized it when I did, but I mean, I was just, all I cared about was guitar growing up. I mean, I didn't care about singing. I didn't care about songwriting, really. I cared about guitar solos. And, I remember, going into college, and when I decided to be a music major and stuff, like the whole songwriting thing wasn't really on my radar. Playing solo acoustic shows, I could have cared less. Like you wouldn't have caught me dead doing a solo acoustic show.
Sure.
My mentality then was like, if I'm going to be playing live, I have to be with a rock and roll band, because the last thing I want to do is the coffee shop thing. I'd rather like blow my brains out,
Yeah.
And I should have been doing that earlier on. I should have been, playing as many solo acoustic gigs as I could. Because one of my things is, I went to like a small liberal arts college up in Maine that, you know, had a really small gene pool of musicians, you know what I mean? So it was always really hard to try to find guys that wanted to, one, play the same kind of music or play music at all. And so when I was young, like I just started going to like all these blues jams at bars and stuff. And that's like where I kind of got more of my experience of like playing in band scenarios and stuff. So, you know, I was learning a lot about guitar and learning about theory and all that stuff. But at the same time, like I wasn't getting as much of like the live experience. I mean, I didn't start touring until I moved to California. And I would have, you know, looking back now, like I should have been doing like the singer-songwriter thing in conjunction with, you know, just woodshedding as much as I could on the guitar, you know. And it's funny, man, because back then, you know, I would buy records based on how good the guitar solos.
That's why everybody bought records. Yeah. You know, if you're a guitar player, you like guitar. You know, you're not going to buy it based on the, you know.
Yeah, and it's funny, like the CDs that I still have in my collection from that time period are the CDs that had good songs. Like I got rid of like I call it like guitarded. I got rid of like the guitarded albums like a long time ago, where just like, you know, it just wasn't musical. It was just like I equate that kind of playing to like, you know, bodybuilding, and it's like, okay, it's somebody, you know, basically showing you
yeah, I get
how many scales they know, how many chops they have, and it's not musical to me, you know.
So you wish you would have focused more on the melodies and the songwriting as opposed to exclusively on the guitar solos.
Yeah, and I remember, you know, I'm glad that I did have the epiphany when I did, like probably like halfway or 3/4 of the way through college, because I had such a fucking ball buster guitar teacher, man. I mean, there were so many lessons where like we wouldn't even play guitar. We'd look at the real book and we'd like analyze a song, like analyze a melody, and just talk about substitutions and everything you can do. And I mean, he just like tore me up like all the time. And I mean, there were lessons where I was leaving almost in tears because I'd bust my ass to like, I'm going to show him this week. I'm going to show him that I worked really hard, and you know, but he would always be like, I remember him always saying, Matt, you know, if you were a monster, man, you'd be a monster already, man. You'd be playing professional right now. You know, it's just like when I was getting into like Derek Trucks back then. And I mean, obviously Derek started playing live and professional when he was like 11.
Yeah.
You know, the dude's a total freak of nature. But I remember just having that understanding, or it was like the light bulb turning on moment where I was like, I'm a competent guitar player. Like I definitely know my way around the fretboard, and you know, I can probably hang with anybody, but am I the greatest guitar player in the world? No. And do I need to, one, learn how to sing better and write a song that's worth a damn to make myself more valuable? Yes. And that's like when I really had that, you know, that focus of like, I need to learn how to write good songs, you know, and then use the tools of, you know, everything I learned from guitar to just be a better songwriter, and then, you know, make whatever I was writing a little bit more interesting versus just, you know, your cowboy chords singer-songwriter thing, you know?
Yeah. That's a tough question too, that I asked, because it's like, you know, how far back do you want to go? Do you say, well, I wish I skipped all of this and I just met the love of my life, or I wish I skipped this and got the job.
Right.
Like, that's just not how life works. So it's always
you
know, it's one of those catch-22 questions, you know?
It's funny. There was a moment too. I remember it was like a defining moment for me. And it was, I remember I couldn't fit guitar lessons in with my instructor in college, like my final year, just because of like the other requirements I had to, you know, fulfill. But this is like when I was definitely into, you know, writing more, and I wasn't asking him this to, you know, try to sound like a smart ass or anything. I remember asking him because, you know, I had started kind of writing some jazz tunes, like for some composition classes and stuff. And, you know, he was like going through and just like analyzing some of the melody choices and, you know, just offering suggestions like, you might want to try this chord change over that melody, whatever. And I remember asking him, you know, like, do you have a song like that you've written that you could play? Like, I'd love to hear it. And I wasn't trying to sound sarcastic or anything.
Sure.
And he just like looked at me. He said, what do you mean? I said, don't you must have some songs you've written. Said, no.
Yeah, because you're giving me all this advice, man. You've got to, what is it based on?
Right. And I was just like, wow.
Interesting.
That was like, it was a major kind of like defining moment, you know?
That's cool when that happens.
So
that's really cool when that happens. Yeah, that's good. Good for you, man. It's funny when you were talking about, I was like thinking about, God, this guy's a little bit demotivating. What did he do? Why is he teaching some fucking kid in Maine or wherever the hell you were lessons, and he's like ripping you apart? It didn't seem like could have been a little more supportive.
Well, it was interesting, man, because I'm still in contact with him and I love him to death. Like, he's a great dude. And I remember like the first time we kind of came back in contact, I was, still in my old band and we were playing a show up in the same town where I went to college, and he came out, and it was just really great. And, I just,
hey man, here's my CD. Where's your CD? You got yours, right?
No, I was like, I basically told him, I was like, man, like, I got to hand it to you, man. Like you kicked my ass. I was like, thank you. Like, there were so many times where like I busted my ass like every week. And like, there were a couple times where like I left like almost in tears, man. He's just like, hey man, he's like, I didn't want to go easy on you. He's like, I knew that you had that like strong passion. And he's like, I knew that you had the drive to do it. And he's like, I could sense it. And he's like, I didn't want to go easy on you. And I was like, thanks,
Yeah.
So
Well, good for you, man.
It's, yeah.
Hey, Desert Island Discs. What would be your top 3?
Whew.
Just for this minute, man.
Sure.
It could change tomorrow.
Wildflowers, Tom Petty. I mean, that would always make the list. No matter what day or what age I am, or time, like mindset. And then man, that's a tough one. I'd probably have to pick a Dylan record. He's been such a huge influence on me as well. I mean, it's tough to say between like the early folk Dylan records, like, I mean, I know that like Times They Are Changing had a big impact on me, along with Freewheelin', or like the Bob Johnston era Dylan records that he cut. 3 that he cut in Nashville, and then like Highway 61. I don't know if I had to pick one Dylan record, probably like Blonde on Blonde, I think. And then the third would probably be. Probably something between either like a Mississippi John Hurt record, like like the Complete OK sessions, because I mean Mississippi John Hurt was like a big influence on me as a player. It's developing the fingerstyle thing that I do, or something like Ry Cooder, probably like Ry Cooder's Paradise and Lunch album.
Sure. Yeah, those are all in line with the kind of music you're making.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you could see those are your influences.
Yeah.
What's the most important thing you've learned about yourself over this journey, man? Because you've done a lot, so I'm sure you've learned a lot.
One thing I've learned, that nothing comes easy. Nothing comes easy, and it's just I guess it comes down to like the work ethic thing. Like, I've always worked incredibly hard for anything I've achieved, and I mean, yes, certain things do come easy, like certain aspects of playing or writing, but I don't know, I feel like you always have to dig deep to really get the reality that you want, or get the lifestyle you want, or what. It can be a grind at times, but I think it's worth it. I think, getting to that whole thing that I feel like the harder I work, the more payoffs I get, Yeah.
There's not a lot of low hanging fruit. That's for sure.
Every now and then, but you definitely take advantage of that when it happens. You definitely feel thankful for it when it happens.
Yeah,
but,
sure.
But yeah, everything is, that, and I guess patience, I've really learned like the importance of patience, because.
Are you a patient? Are you naturally patient?
I think I'm getting better.
That's good.
I think it's, and especially, since I've been with my manager, like she's really helped exercise that a lot more, because not having proper representation for so long, when you get used to doing everything yourself, I mean, you know, it's like nobody's patient anymore, you know, and it's just, you want it now. And it's like the age of immediacy, you know what I mean? And, some things don't happen immediate, and you'd have to just exercise your patience. Cause I feel like when I have exercised more patience, stuff kind of naturally flows better. And, you know, like for instance, getting back to what we were talking about with this album process of, if I wasn't patient, and I mean, initially when I recorded this album with David, my goal was like, screw this, I'm going to record this record and I'm going to put it out in the same year. You know what I mean?
Well, of course, that's a natural.
Yeah. You know, it's like, I'm going to, you know, screw this. Like, people waiting a year to put a record out, I'm going to do it the same year, you know? And, had I not been patient, you know, there wouldn't have been some key moments of like the exposure for the record, or getting the proper team that I needed to get behind it, you know? So I think, always, you know, nothing comes easy. Like, work hard at it, because you'll get better results. And then, you know, the more patient I can be, I think will always warrant better outcome.
Well, if you're becoming patient now, you're, you know, really relatively young guy, man. So you get it together. You have it together. So I think so.
I'm trying, man. Sometimes, most days I wake up, I feel like I have no idea what I'm doing.
We're all just trying, man. That's how, you know, it's just, what do you do when you're having a bad day to make yourself feel better?
One, I like exercising a lot. So, you know, I'll try to go on a walk, or, you know, just get outside. I'll put a record on that I love. You know, I mean, I'm a huge vinyl collector.
I noticed.
Yeah. You know, some people do heroin, some people can't stop buying vinyl. You know? So it's like, you know, that's another perk of touring all the time. Like, I've got like my choice little record shops that, I always support. But you know, definitely throw on records. That always puts me in, I mean, hey, just woodshed and the guitar, man. I mean, I do a lot of other stuff right now, to just play without an objection or objective or goal. You know, that's always great, you know, and it's a release. Or, you know, I'll read, you know, I try to read as much as I can, you know. I feel like when I can get in the groove of reading on a really steady level all the time, I feel like song ideas come even quicker, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. The more information you're putting in, the more you got to idea prompts you have.
Yeah.
Who's had the biggest influence on you? I don't mean musically. I mean, biggest influence in your life.
Sure. I think, you know, I think probably my parents, you know, I mean, there's just obviously so much that I've learned from them, and, you know, I'm really tight with them. And,
they're in Massachusetts still?
They mainly live in northern Vermont now. They live in a little town called Hyde Park, which is near Stowe. But they have an apartment above my grandparents' house that, they'll come down and, like, you know, check up on my grandparents.
That's cool.
Most of my, like, you know, extended family lives between Western Massachusetts and like the Hartford area. So they'll come down just to, like, you know, check in with everybody. But I mean, between everything, a work ethic and, you know, I mean, their love of music. I mean, if they hadn't been playing records every day growing up, I might not have got the music bug early on. And I mean, I think the one thing that I will always be forever indebted to them for is that, you know, they always gave me the mentality of do what you want in terms of, like, try to pursue a career that makes you happy. Don't just pursue something for a monetary standpoint. I mean, obviously money is important. We all need it, but they're like, try to find something that makes you happy. And whenever you find that, work your ass off to get it, you know? And I mean, I'm forever thankful for that, you know, they weren't pressuring me to go into some sort of, you know, business profession or other, corporate job, like a lot of people do.
Well, especially because they had those kind of jobs, and it would have been like an easy thing for them to say, hey, why don't you be an accountant like me? Or why don't you go into something safe like the medical field,
Totally.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. I mean, and they've been so incredibly supportive the whole way. I mean, it's at a point too where you're like, thanks, Mom. You don't have to keep liking every Facebook post,
Hey, man, be grateful for that.
But yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But yeah, it's I'm so fortunate for them.
You have any bad habits?
Bad habits. I think every now and then, I still bite my nails every now and then,
You know what's real funny, man? I bit my nails from the time I was 5 years old.
Yeah.
To probably 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. One day I said, no, it was about 3 years ago. It was right when I started playing guitar.
Yeah.
I just said, I got to stop this. And it was like that. It literally and I tried stopping years and I just stopped. It was really weird.
Sure. Yeah. I've gotten a lot better at it, but every now and then I still catch
you
myself.
got an urge to just pull one off, man. I feel you, man.
Usually it's like on those long drives where you're just like, I'll be like, what the hell am I doing? I'm like, stop, And,
oh yeah. When you're alone with nothing to do, that's the toughest. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any hobbies or interests outside of music?
Yeah. I love to read as much as I can. It unfortunately doesn't, I try to take advantage of that when it presents itself.
Sure.
Like I'm going to be home pretty much all of June, which I'm really excited for. So
good for you,
there's
man.
a couple books I want to try to bang out. I love running almost every day. I love going on hikes. I love cooking a lot. I love cooking, and I like making cocktails.
What do you cook, dude?
Well, I like doing a lot of like protein and veggies, like lately I've been on a big pork kick. So I've been just, putting pork chops in the oven with different seasonings and stuff, but veggies, I do a lot of kale, but I'll do a lot of, peppers and veggies and stuff. Sometimes I'll, incorporate rice or something like that. But, when the, when the time presents itself, because it is a process, I like to make pierogies.
There you go.
And that's like when you do that, you basically make a kind of like a party out of it, because you get everybody. And I've done some of those in Nashville. So we're actually trying to figure out the next time we can get together to do pierogies. But, stuff like that. I love, I do this really good eggplant Parmesan dish. Cooking for me it just relaxes me. And if I'm off the road, I'll obviously go out to check out shows and support friends for their shows, but
sure.
I prefer to have people over my house to just catch up because
it's more relaxing. That's a very Northeastern thing. You know that?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I believe so.
But it's like I'd rather have somebody over, make some cocktails, listen to some records, play some guitar, just catch up. I feel like if you're catching up at a club or a restaurant, it's noisy and it's kind of harder to really have a proper catch up that way. But, so I guess, entertaining would be on there too. I love having people over and cooking for people just because it's relaxing for me.
That's really cool, man. You're like a super healthy dude, man. Talk about a specific experience that changed your life or altered the way you think about things.
Sure. I remember, it's funny. A really good friend was over yesterday, and I remember there was a moment when I first moved to California. I remember really it was definitely a completely different culture from the Northeast, so adapting to the Southern California lifestyle, and California is such a freaking massive state, and there's so many different. California could probably be 4 or 5 states.
Yeah. Yeah.
And San Diego is its own entity versus Orange County, which is its own entity, and then LA, it's its own freaking island. But I remember moving down to San Diego first and getting into, and I hate using the term, the California flake thing, but just really kind of, the first few like brushes of dealing with flaky people really, I remember it stuck with me because in the Northeast, like if you said you were going to be somewhere, you were going to do it. You're going to be there. Or like if you told somebody you were going to do something, you were going to do it. And the specific instance came because like my first job in California, I was working at a coffee shop like right out of college, and one of my really good friends who I moved out to California with, we moved out together, and then we moved in with another friend of mine from college, and he was working for a brewing company in Nashville. I mean, not Nashville, in San Diego. And, I remember we were like, all right, we're going to have like the housewarming party. Like we haven't had this yet. So we're just going to like have a blowout party, like free keg, and like come out and like, let's have a good time. And so like, we invited all our friends from like the coffee shop and like everybody else. And, we were just trying to get head count so we could, get an idea of who was going to show up. And everyone's like, yeah, free beer. Like we're going to be there. It's going to be great. And then I think like 5 people showed up, and I remember just being like, huh, like wow. That's really interesting. And like, somebody told me this too, like a long time ago. It's like, who you trust is like gold, and I remember that was like a real defining moment for me of like, wow, like, the element of trust with somebody, like you really have to be careful with that, Yeah. And I remember that was like a major, major defining moment for me.
Yeah, and the only way to learn that is by being disappointed, which is unfortunate. But or any way to learn any lesson is by like learning, tuition. It's paying tuition, emotionally Absolutely. Or financially, one way or another. You got to pay tuition to learn.
Sure.
Lessons are extra.
For sure, and I mean, getting back to kind of what we were talking about previously, where I feel really fortunate for who I have in my like immediate circle and in my life, because I worked really hard to attract and keep good people there that I can trust, and like do all that stuff. And, I remember younger, obviously living in, San Diego and stuff, and even, various times of LA, people who you meet through the years, you like aren't trustworthy or stuff like that. You kind of get more of a sense as you've had run-ins with that, and it's like, I kind of see that more a mile away now from, people that you can count on versus just an acquaintance.
Yeah. And like I said, unfortunately, tuition on that's how you learn all that crap.
Yeah.
Hey, let me ask you last question, SZLACHETKA. I never called you that, so I feel funny saying that. I should get on your. And the only way I knew your name, I didn't do this is like a Tony Robbins immersion. I watched the 3-minute video. I didn't watch the 1 minute. I was like, I'm going to get this once, and I'm going to take them extra 2 minutes, and it'll work. And it has. So this will be the last question. Knowing life is precious and time isn't infinite, what's the one thing that's most important to you, SZLACHETKA, as far as making sure that you're using whatever time you do have left wisely?
I think relationships. I think relationships are incredibly important. I think who you choose to have in your life is important because, you don't have a lot of time. So if you're going to spend time aside from, obviously doing stuff on your own and working and everything, but I think who you choose to have in your wheelhouse and your initial circle is really important because it's going to, it's going to be like an infinite return for you of your life in terms of, mental happiness and everything. And I think it's important just to have, people that you can support and be a positive force with, but, same in return for you. You know?
Good for you, man. That is super important. Hey, I can't thank you enough for your time. I want to tell people where they could find you and how they can support you. First of all, it's SZLACHETKA, SZLACHETKA. And you can find them at szlachetkamusic.com. I really encourage you to go check out Heart of My Hometown. It's a really, really refreshing, great album. Go support him on tour. His tour dates, he'll be hitting the Midwest and the South and the Northeast. And you're playing at Gearfest, Sweetwater's Gearfest, right?
Yeah. So that Friday and Saturday, I think that's the 22nd and 23rd, I believe,
of
June.
Awesome.
Yeah. And so I'm going to be performing in the Bose tent. They've been a really, really amazing asset in my life, and they're big supporters. And so I'm going to be doing, some full band showcase for them like all day. Awesome. Between both those days. And within the next week or so, we should be, pinpointing the start times for each of those. Cause, I think what we're talking about right now is I think like morning hours and like early afternoon, I'll probably be doing some solo acoustic stuff, but then afternoon, it'll be the full 5-piece of what I've been touring with.
That's awesome.
It'll be a lot of fun, man. Sweetwater is like insane. And that place is, if you ever get a chance to go there, I highly encourage it. I mean, their staff is unbelievable, but it's like going to Willy Wonka's chocolate
store.
factory.
Yeah, there you go.
It's unbelievable. It really is.
You're not coming to Florida, I'm assuming?
Unfortunately, not right now. I'm trying to get some dates on the books, but it hasn't, unfortunately, come to that yet. But
nobody comes down here. It's racism. Nobody ever wants to see me in Florida. No, I know it's so hard to get down here because it's like off the beaten path, and unless you're getting like 5, 6 or more cities, it's not very convenient travel wise. Right. Yeah, I totally get that, man. And what else? Also check him out on Facebook and Instagram. It's SZLACHETKA Music. And he's got some cool stuff on his webpage from Diddy TV, some videos. Check out his full band stuff. It's really cool, man. And man, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Any final words of wisdom?
Try to, in terms of practice, I guess, learn songs, man. I think, learn songs because I mean, obviously it's important to learn scales and all that stuff. It's very important, but when you get to certain stage, it's just chops don't really matter, man. It's just learn songs and play to the song, and it's funny. One of the people that I collaborate with a lot in Nashville is this amazing writer named Adam Wright, who he basically wrote 90% of the latest Leanne Womack record and plays in her band, and he has the current Alan Jackson single and plays with Alan's band and stuff. So he's a total beast, but we're both super into JJ Cale and Mark Knopfler and the Everly Brothers and stuff. And we were just hanging out before we started writing this tune. And, I guess his uncle is a, really, really good jazz pianist. And he was telling me when he was younger, he was picking his uncle's brain about, what scales would you use over this chord change or that chord change? And he's got this awesome, Georgia Southern drawl, and he's just and my uncle's scales. He's just play songs, man. And,
that's awesome.
So, yeah.
Well, I think it's good advice, man.
Yeah.
That's great.
Make it musical,
Man, well, thank you very much for everything. I really appreciate it. I've always enjoyed talking to you every time. You're a super positive guy. Anything I could do to help you on my end, I certainly will. And best of luck and continued success with the record and the next record after that, man.
I appreciate the support, Craig. It means a lot. So thank you for having me on your show.
You're welcome. It's been my pleasure. Everybody support SZLACHETKAmusic.com. Go say hi to him on tour and enjoy his music. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this interview as much as I did. Thanks again to SZLACHETKA for spending time with us. I certainly appreciate it. And go to everyonelovesguitar.com, get on our mailing list, our newsletter list, and we'll send you some good stuff. And most important, remember that happiness is a choice, so choose wisely. Be nice, go play your guitar, and have some fun. Till next time, peace and love, everybody. I'm out. We hope you enjoyed this show. If you did, subscribe to the Everyone Loves Guitar podcast, and you can do this online at everyonelovesguitar.com or on iTunes. And if you like the show, please leave us a 5-star positive review. The more 5-star reviews we get, the higher our show ranks, and higher rankings mean we get to continue speaking with cool, interesting guests on our show. We'll see you on the next episode, and until then, keep playing your guitar and have fun making music.